Hello, we are starting with video 7 of RM and IPR of module 2. So in the last video 6, we had covered about the errors which might occur in research design and different types of research design starting with exploratory to descriptive. So in this video, we'll be learning about different types of descriptive research design. So first being we have this cross-sectional design or cross-sectional studies, which is also called as one-time research. So in this, it is a type of research design involving the collection of information from any given sample of population elements only once. That is, you are going to collect the data at one shot, only once. For example, in a study, we will simply measure the cholesterol levels of daily walkers and non-walkers in a park. So will not be influenced by non-walkers to take up that activity or advise them to walk daily or take some healthy diets and all. So we just go with taking up the data from those walkers, right? So even the psychologists can use this cross-sectional studies to analyze mental health within a community and especially to carry out the service. So this is what about cross-sectional studies. Coming to the advantages of cross-sectional studies. It gives a snapshot of a population. That is, they provide a snapshot in the at particular moment, allowing researchers to examine the prevalence of certain characteristics, behaviors, or conditions even. And again, quick, and it is cost effective. How do you say it is cost effective? They are relatively quick to conduct, and they require very much lesser resources or fewer resources to carry out the research work, and it is suitable for prevalence and associations. Cross-sectional studies are well suited for determining the prevalence of a particular condition or behavior within a population and for exploring associations between variables. It is also useful for generating hypotheses. How do you do that? See, cross-sectional studies can generate hypotheses about potential associations between variables, which can be further investigated using more rigorous study designs. And it also gives the diversity of participants. So coming to the limitations of your descriptive studies. What are the different limitations? It is limited to causal inference. That is, you will not be able to establish a cause-effect relationship between the variables. You will not be knowing the intensity of the relationship of the causal variable, that is independent variable and dependent variable. It cannot study changes over time. Cross-sectional studies cannot track changes in variables over time, which is again a big limitation. And it doesn't have potential for recalling bias. So participants may not be able to recall because you are taking it at that moment at only one shot, right? So you don't give them much time, just 5-10 minutes of recalling. So they may tend to not recall some kind of valid data which is required by you. And it is limited in studying rare events. Because see, rare events occur at unusual times, and when you are collecting the data, you're doing it at one shot, so you might not get that kind of general or reliable data. So this was about your cross-sectional studies. Coming to longitudinal designs or longitudinal studies. So it is a type of research design involving a fixed sample of population elements that is measured repeatedly at different time periods. So the sample remains the same over time, thus providing a series of pictures which, when viewed over time or viewed together, they portray a vivid different illustration of the situation and the changes that are taking place over time. So this longitudinal studies track changes in variables and behaviors over time, allowing researchers to examine trends, patterns, and causal relationships. So let us move on to the advantages of longitudinal studies. First being the time dimension, that is, they incorporate a time dimension enabling researchers to observe changes over time and capture the development of variables or behaviors. That is the main thing. And then causality assessment. Yes. So we'll be able to find out the causal effect relationship between the variables, and also it helps in sequencing, and it reduces the bias also. So there will be reduced bias in this complex research questions and identifying individual differences. So coming to the limitations of this descriptive is, it is time consuming and costly, and moreover it has the chances of attritioning and dropping out, right? And external validity is also less, and ethical considerations also has to be considered. So these are the advantages and disadvantages of descriptive studies. So next, let us move on to the methods of descriptive research. So what are the different methods? First being the survey method, wherein you are going to take a survey or brief interview or discussion with individuals about a specific topic. It might be through questionnaires, interviews, etc. And then observation method, wherein you record a behavioral pattern of people and objects and events in a systematic manner to obtain information about the phenomenon of interest, right? So those two methods are important. Just make sure it is, we have two methods for descriptively putting out or taking the data. That is, one is the survey method and one is the observation method. So next being the types of survey, like you have something like true survey, omnibus survey, wherein you are taking the survey one at a time, or taking it at regular intervals and all. And you also you have different means of doing the survey, that is through traditional telephonic interviews or through computer assisted telephonic interviews. And then you have this personal in-home interviews, personal interviews with computers, mail interviews and all such. Okay, so these are the different methods through which we conduct the interviews. And then advantages and disadvantages. So coming to the advantages of your descriptive research, it defines subject characteristics. Yes, you go deep into a variable or a parameter, and then you tend to get the data of that, or get the information about that. And the next being, it helps to measure data trends. Yes, because whether it is trending in a positive way or a negative way, you will get to know. And comparison. Yes, it is used to compare how different demographics respond to certain variables. For example, organization may study how people with different income levels react to the launch of a new Apple phone. Yes, this kind of research, it takes a survey that will help determine which group of individuals are purchasing the new Apple phone. Do the low income earners also purchase, or only high income earners? Next is validating existing conditions. So what do you mean by that? When you're not sure about the validity of an existing condition, you can use descriptive research to ascertain the underlying patterns of the research object, because descriptive research methods make an in-depth analysis of each variable before making conclusions. And it is conducted over time. Descriptive research is conducted over time, some time, to ascertain the changes observed at each point of time. The higher the number of times it is conducted, the more authentic the conclusion can be made or will be made. And we do have some of the disadvantages of the descriptive research. So the disadvantages being response and non-response bias. Yeah, if the respondents are not, they do not want to, or they do not wish to respond to the questions or the survey, right? So that might happen. They may decide to influence the result of the research due to personal opinion or biasing towards a particular subject. For example, a stockbroker who also has a business of his own may try to lure investors into investing in his own company by manipulating results. Yes, that is obviously there. They will try to get double benefits with one shot, right? So case study of sample taken from a large population is not representative of the whole population. Yes, obviously, right? Because you cannot, you can assume, but you cannot predict that it is the same of the entire population, because it varies. The perception also varies. A case study or sample taken from a large population is non-representative of the whole population. It has limited scope, because it is limited to the what of research with no information on why it has been, right? So in this slide, you will be able to see the differences between exploratory and descriptive research on a whole. So exploratory or formulative, descriptive or diagnostic. Coming to the overall design, exploratory has a flexible design. It must provide opportunity for considering different aspects of the problem. And when we come to descriptive, it has a rigid design. It must make enough provision for protection against bias and must maximize reliability. Coming to sampling design, non-probability sampling is used. Most probably it is purposive or judgmental, and here it is probability sampling design. Coming to statistical design, no pre-planned design for analysis, and in descriptive you need to pre-plan it. Observational design, unstructured instruments for collection of data, whereas in description you go with structured questionnaire or well thought out instruments for collection of data. And operational design is no fixed decision about the operational procedures. Here you have advanced decisions about operational procedures. See, at the end of this module, we'll be able to learn the differences between the exploratory, descriptive, causal, conclusive and all, so that you will be able to write exactly. If it's like if they give three topics altogether to write the differences, then you should be in a position to write out the differences. Now coming to, you have a topic called observation research. So what do you mean by observation research? Observation is just watching what people, right? It would seem to be an obvious method of carrying out research in psychology. Observational research or field research is a type of correlation research in which a researcher observes ongoing behavior. It allows researchers to collect data based on their view of the behavior and characteristics of the respondent, with the respondents themselves not directly having an input. It is often used in market research, psychology, and some other social science research to understand human behavior as well. For example, how can an observational study be conducted to determine which two brand of soda is more popular in college campus? By developing a research question and by identifying variables and population of interest and developing an appropriate study, we can go with the research ahead. And then participant observation. Participant observation is a method by which researchers systematically observe people while joining in their routine activities. The participant observation means watching the events or situation or activities from inside by taking part in the group to be observed. He freely interacts with the other group members, participates in various activities of the group, acquires the way of life of the observed group or his own, and studies their behavior or other activities, not as an outsider, also by becoming a member. Non-participant observation. So what do you mean by non-participant observation? When the observer observes the group passively from a distance without participating in the group activities, it is known as non-participant observation. For example, quantitative observation, qualitative observation also comes. It involves the objective collection of numerical data whose results can be analyzed using numerical and statistical methods. Qualitative observation involves the monitoring of characteristics and not the measurement of numbers. Yes, they do that. So we are done with the descriptive research design. Next, now we'll move on to causal research or experimental research. So exploratory and conclusive. So under conclusive we have descriptive, and wherein under descriptive we learnt about longitudinal and cross sectional, and now we are moving out to causal or experimental under conclusive. So causal research is used to obtain evidence of cause and effect relationship. Causal is just to find out the relationship between the variables between two variables, that is one independent and one dependent variable. It is appropriate for the following purposes. For what? To understand which variables are the causes, that is which are individual independent variables and which are dependent variables, and also to determine the nature of the relationship between the causal variables and the effect to be predicted. So how do you predict the effect? either through theoretical, yes, because qualitative answer you need to go. In the context of department store project manager, which we had taken last time, a researcher wishes to determine whether the presence and helpfulness of salespeople will influence the sales of housewares. Right, so we have both causal and effect variables. Yes, a causal design could be formulated in which two groups of otherwise comparable housewares departments of a particular chain are selected. Trained salespeople are stationed in one group of houseware department but not in the other. So this was about the example. So causal or experimental. So again, coming to this, so it is a systematic approach, and it involves planning and conducting experiments to test specific hypotheses and draw valid conclusions about the effects of independent variable on dependent variable. Yes, that is true. So well-designed experiment helps researchers minimize bias, control extraneous factors, and maximize the internal validity of their findings. So the first step being research question or hypothesis. So initially you need to clearly define the research question or the research hypothesis that the experiment aims to address. The hypothesis states the expected relationship between the dependent and independent variable. Next is independent and dependent variable. You need to define that. How do you do that? Identify the variables which are under investigation. The independent variable is manipulated or controlled by the researcher, while the dependent variable is the outcome or response that is being measured. Got it? So next is experimental group and control group. So experimental group is divide the participants or subjects into two or more groups. The experimental group receives the treatment or manipulation of the independent variable, while the control group serve as a baseline and does not receive the treatment. Yes, so whatever being done, the treatment or procedure and all, it is only with the experimental group. Next is randomization. Randomly assign participants to different groups to minimize the influence of confounding variables, because see, we have learned the meaning of confounding variables in the beginning, right? So again, these words confounding variables will be there in the presentations, and ensure that the groups are comparable to the at the start of the experiment. It is used to control the effect of extraneous variables. So next one being control of extraneous variables. So extraneous variables is it's like you have one dependent and you have one independent variable. So apart from one independent variable, the dependent variable may be exposed to, or they might be affected with other variables also apart from the independent variable, right? So those are called as extraneous variables. And then replication. According to this principle, the experiment shall be conducted more than once, that is, it should be repeated again and again. So considering the example which we took last time, to test the effectiveness of teaching methods, there should be more than one experiment group and control group. Yes, we do have. And next is the sample size collection. Determine the appropriate sample size to ensure the experiment's statistical power and reliability of the results. Larger sample sizes generally provide more robust findings, that is, more reliable or more good findings kind of thing. So these were the different steps of your experimental research or causal research design. So the next part of the module, that is module 2 in this video 7, is classification of experimental design or causal research design. So basically this experimental design is classified into 4 types: pre-experimental, true experimental, quasi-experimental and statistical experimental. So here what is like, we will be reading it in detail with all these 4 different types of causal or experimental designs. So the next video, that is video 8 of module 2, we will be covering up these methods, that is both experimental methods and that is the causal or the experimental method. So we have all these four, which basically relates to the statistics or calculation of the data or interpretation of data statistically. So this video 7 is done with this, and in video 8 we will go in detail of the different types of research methods. Thank you.